Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Well, first of all, welcome everyone here. It's interesting in the background of some of you because you're not necessarily new at business, you're not necessarily new at medical, not necessarily new at reimbursement. So it's going to be a fun conversation because this is geared both ways, and I hope that you will get something out of it because, the reality is you have to have a strategy, and not everyone has what really is a strategy. They have a hope, they have a thought, they have a direction, and that's fantastic. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I mean, I do workshops on strategy, vision and plan and goals and milestones and execution and tactics and measurements and reporting and communication and adapting and adopting, right? So we can read a book and get that. But the reality is when you look at strategy, it's more than that. And I was using the example of Cameron earlier. How many of you watch Alone or Survivor? Okay, are familiar with, well, someone gets dropped into the middle of nowhere with roughly 10 things in their backpack, and they have to survive. And they're going against other people. Well, if you don't have any idea what that environment is, if you don't know what predators are there, what food supplies are there, or what water supplies are there, the basics of the ecosystem, your level of success is not high. But the more you have that information, the more you can then potentially succeed, but you then have the opportunity to adopt and adapt to the changes in that ecosystem, depending on what you find out and explore. And that's my point of, you can have a strategy that has all the X's and O's, but if you don't know it and live it, how can you have it unless you've known it and lived it? So knowing the ecosystem. So really the takeaway today is really going to be the approach of the strategy, looking at what is the ecosystem, who are the key stakeholders, and what are the transactional relationships between them that you can leverage and or participate in. And I'll give you a real world example at the very end on how I've done in the past, but I'm going to go through the structure first. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yes. Right. Thank you.
Okay, you have my bio, so I don't want to go too deep unless you want me to, but I have 30 years of healthcare experience. And I will tell you, I'm very proud to say my first job out of college was actually a Big 5 sporting goods.
Yes.
And I was told by two very successful people back then, oh my gosh, you worked retail for 2 years and you're a manager? That's fantastic. I just work retail, it's just Big 5. The reality is when you have inventory and customer service and cash handling and merchandising and ordering and people management and all these different things that you get in a retail or a restaurant type environment, it's actually very, very powerful resume compared to someone who just did X at company Y. So I just always want to put that out there because it really meant a lot to me. I'm 57 now, and I was 23 then. So that's 30, 40 years ago, and I still remember that conversation today. So my background, though, I went to pharmaceuticals. I went to Adams Laboratories, which is now called Mucinex. Everyone familiar with Mucinex, cough and cold? I bring that up, and I normally don't bring that up because they were only there for 3 years, but I did sales and went to managed care. So I used to negotiate with Foundation Health back in the day where it was around Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Kaiser at the time, on getting pharmaceutical products on formulary, getting services paid for. So I could cut my teeth doing that a long time ago. And then went to Allergan, makers of Botox, we're all familiar with that. Spent 10 years with them helping doctors build their businesses to adapt from a clinical practice to more of a clinical and anesthetic practice. And so I did business consulting for 10 years with them, consulted with hundreds and hundreds of doctors, spoke on podium to tens of thousands of doctors on how to manage their business in this way. And it's really interesting. They're an entrepreneur too.
Yep.
People forget that. They are a small business. And so really 80% of businesses are the same. It really is. It's cash flow, people, structure, et cetera, et cetera. I bring this up because that's what then parlayed me into Ascendix Health because I found doctors had cash flow problems a lot. And they're bringing $1 million, $1.2 million, $1.5 million, and they're missing 20 and 30% of the revenues of collections and stuff because they're not managing their billing, they don't have revenue cycle management, have technology to manage it. So that's $200,000 sitting on the table. So I left and started my own billing company, revenue cycle management company. Never did billing before in my life, read a book. But I had my contacts from all my talking about business and stuff. And I borrowed an employee from a friend doctor and their computer in his closet. And that's how I started the company, literally. And then built that, though, and where I'm going with that is, and there's a whole story at the end, but revenue cycle management is billing. You talk to someone about their cash flow, how much credibility do I have? None. How much access or scale do I have for a share of voice in the market? None. So when you think about ecosystem and think about all the parts I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, talk about how that might come together, because that's part of the success story. Okay? So I had a successful exit. We also had a revenue cycle management. I built a buying group. We also built technology for managing the billing and technology for inventory management, which is the buy and bill part of the doctor practice, which I'll get to in a few minutes. I'm talking too fast, just right? Good? Okay. So I bring this up because this was my entrepreneur. I started with my own money. We got friends and family. I brought a buddy in about a year into it. He was my business partner and co-founder later on, and 100% funded by friends and family. No PE, no VC. Did we talk to VC? Absolutely. Did we talk to PE? Absolutely. Every single one of them told us, you're too small for us to invest in without us taking all your equity, but you have something here. If there's any way you can bootstrap it, you need to do that. And so we figured it out and we did. So there's a whole entrepreneur side. I've been on, sitting on my stairs in the dark when it's raining outside, and I haven't taken a pay in a year and a half, and one of my employees just screwed up an account and pissed off one of our customers that just fired us. And I know I'm now not going to get paid for another 4 or 5 months. I got to home and tell my wife that. So I lived the entrepreneur pain, and also deciding, what do you do with a bad customer? Do you keep them because it's cash flow, but it's draining your resources, or do you get rid of them to start a new? So I can tell you that because I have the entrepreneur background there. Modernizing Medicine acquired our business. They're a technology company, but they wanted a revenue cycle management cash flow to go with their technology. It raises their dollars on their multiplier, and it's now roughly a $100 million division for them right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So I'm very proud of that. I still have stock in the company. So
Yeah.
it's a private company, so I do have conflict of interest on working outside of that because personal financial conflict.
Sure.
But great company. After we acquired, I helped them scale it tenfold. I left Modernizing Medicine because I was done. Done with my 2 years that I had to put in, got my stock in. But anyway, the one thing I was missing in my entire journey was the insurance side. I had worked with insurance and worked to get people paid through insurance and worked to get formula insurance, but I never really understood how do they use data, what are their needs, and what are they trying to do. So that's why I went to VSB. Plus, it was in my backyard. Was there for 5 years and senior vice president network programs. So anything that has to do with the doctors, marketing, national advertising, programs, doctor loyalty program, partnerships, went to my teams. I'm after 5 years left there, and now I'm doing consulting, coaching, and advising on strategy, growth, and leadership. You good?
Yeah.
Yep. I had to give you a little more detail on that because when you see the examples, you're going to go, okay, I see. Oh, I see that. Okay. So let's talk ecosystem. It's really interesting. I do have the Growth Factory Venture Summit logo here because I utilized this slide in the conversation we had. So I led the discussion on day 2 with the number of entrepreneurs and venture capital on reimbursement, specifically in healthcare. I used this slide, it's the only slide I had. Because really the questions you have to think about is, who are you selling to? It's not as easy as you think it is. I think we just had the conversation today, go, who am I actually selling to? Who's actually paying? It's not as clean as everyone thinks it is. And then whether you're a product, a device, equipment, technology, or service, who's actually doing the consuming? Not always the same people. Makes it a little trickier in healthcare. When you look at the healthcare ecosystem, now these are the key stakeholders in the ecosystem. There are hundreds and thousands of stakeholders outside, services, associations, legal, marketing, HR, competitive companies with technology or services, financial institutions, banking institutions, all of it. So I'm not speaking to them right now, but they're all there because that's who we are. We are these people on the outside right now. When you look at reimbursement, I use the word payment though, because it's not always reimbursement. When I show you on my slides in a few minutes, a few different ways that you can get paid, it doesn't have to be reimbursement. That should be a goal. And when you pitch into VC, that should be part of your deck. But I'm just telling you, if that is the only thing in your deck, you're in trouble. Because there's hardly ever, and we just had the conversation, hardly ever you're going to come out the gate and get reimbursed by an insurance company tomorrow on a new product, new service, unless it's an absolute Superman blockbuster, and the odds of that are still low because Johnson & Johnson and Genentech and companies like that have 100 to probably 500 to 600 people working on one product to get reimbursed by the different carriers. You think you're gonna come out with this special product and all of a sudden you're just gonna, snap your fingers and it's gonna happen? Yes, it can happen. Reality is probably not. So there needs to be a process, a sequence, a phasing of your revenue flow to demonstrate I have a strategy. We'll talk about those on how to get there. And when I get there, it can look like this, but the odds of us getting there are slim and none right now. What are the payers? Insurance, okay? Insurance companies, payers. Can anyone tell me what the key revenue source is for an insurance company?
Is it Medicare? Employers?
Employers. Employers are buying benefits. So the insurance company, and I've been part of this, they build a product, a group of benefits that they then sell to an employer. An employer is buying those benefits on behalf of their employees and is part of the employee's compensation. So in a sense, the employee is actually buying those benefits from their employer.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, the product that this insurance company is selling to Disney is not necessarily the same product that Boeing's getting. And it's not necessarily the same product that Cordova Unified School District is getting, which is why it gets really interesting on what benefits do you have, what's covered, what's not covered, what deductible do you have, how much copay do you have, and in what city and what country is it covered for and what time zone. I'm dead freaking serious.
Yeah.
But I will also ruin a myth of people. Insurance companies do want you to use your benefits. Because if you don't use your benefits, then the employer doesn't have the value, differentiated value to the employee, and there's no reason for me to buy it from them. So they have to use it. I hate it when I read when they're denying everything. They don't want us to use it. Yes, they do, but they want you to use the right benefits at the right time with the right type of doctors that provide the right service. Why? Because the patient has to be satisfied. If they're not satisfied, they don't use the benefits, they don't get the revenues, they don't get the renewals. So you have the employer benefits, you have the employees that also are dash consumers, right? It's all of us. And we also become patients when we go to utilize those benefits. And where do we utilize them at? Doctors. But let's not forget, all people who provide healthcare are providers. It could be a pharmacy. It could be a PT. It could be a food truck for rehab. It could be thousands. It could be for a technology. It doesn't have to be a doctor, although we tend to look at doctors' reimbursement. I've had 5 conversations in the last 2 weeks with people who are no health care whatsoever. So food for this, or so this for this, or this for this, a device for this. But yet it is health care, and it is affected by reimbursement. But it's not necessarily a doctor. So let's not forget that. That's the ecosystem. Very important to understand that, because I'm going to next slide, don't go there. Next slide, I'm actually going to pull up an example of a prescription product. And I'm going to ask you right now, how many financial transactions do you think happens with a patient who gets a prescription and they go to the pharmacy and get it filled? If you were to guess, one financial transaction?
7.
2, 3, or 7?
The middle, because there's the middle companies that are everything working
And then there's
together, and there's the insurance payer too.
What's a middle company? Give me an example.
PBM or whatever, or
No, who's the guy that did the soccer teams?
Kevin Nagel, pharmacy
Kevin
benefits.
Nagel.
manager.
That his company's a middle pharmacy company.
All right, so let's I'll give you that. But you actually have the right number for the wrong reason. Next slide. Because when you have RX, you have the employer that purchased the benefit from the insurance company. That is a financial transaction in that prescription.
Yeah.
You have the employee, as I said, part of their compensation. The employee purchased care from the doctor, i.e. that's what they're going for. The doctor should get reimbursed. That's where you get to from whom and by when. And then the doctor gives a prescription. That prescription actually is currency that the patient then utilizes at the insurance company or the pharmacy that gets filled. And then the patient gets it filled by the pharmacy purchased that from a wholesaler distributor, and the wholesale distributor had to buy it from you as a manufacturer. By the way, there's about 7 other transactions in here. I just tried, you're exactly right, PBMs. But these are the type of basic things that people don't even think about.
Yeah.
These are stakeholders within the key stakeholders and are the key stakeholders. There's multiple transactions there. And if one thing breaks down there, if this doesn't get filled, because the pharmacy doesn't have it because they couldn't get it from the distributor. So on back order, who's pissed off? The patient. Patient doesn't get healthy. They can't, the child or whatever it is that they're getting a prescription for. Bad. If the doctor doesn't see the patient in time or doesn't give him a prescription and just kind of writes them off or gives him, tries to over medicate them, bad. There's a lot of quality control in here that you have no control over that absolutely impacts your transactions with the doctors. Fair enough? Okay, so I'm gonna go to the next slide. So I talked about payments earlier, and by the way, I'm giving you the condensed version.
Sure.
Just so you know, this is like a 3-hour conversation, which is multiple workshops. But when you look at payments, so yes, you have the reimbursement, and yes, the goal is to be on formulary, it's to be covered by Medicare and all the different payers, absolutely, right? That's like the gold standard. And then to get demand or utilization from the doctors either prescribing and or the patients getting it and having it on the pharmacy and paid for. That's the goal. That's what you'll have in your deck if you're looking for PE or VC money. The challenge though is there's other ways to get paid. So there's fee for service, which is cash based. You go to a dermatologist for your normal skin check and you want a skin tag taken off, it's considered aesthetic, you have to pay for that. It's fee for service. You go to PT, and I went to PT when I had my knee replaced, and they only did it so much that I could actually work in the garden, and that was about it. That's about as much PT as I got. So I had to pay cash for incremental PT so I could be more active. That's fee for service. Insurance reimbursements I talked about is with pharmacy providers, as I mentioned. Insurance partially reimburses. How many times do you go to a dentist where you can get something, but you have to pay 80% of it, or 20% of it? Or you're at a doctor's office and the other one covers it. I'm not talking deductible. I'm not talking about copay. I'm talking about literally, they only pay a certain amount. That is part of the package that the insurance company sold to that employer. The reality is that debt absolutely exists. There's a buy and bill, and people forget this. There's where the doctors actually purchase the product of the device, and they resell it as part of their service to the patient. Okay? That is actually technically fee for service, and the reality is it's outside of the bounds of the insurance benefit. But it is a very effective way for both the patient to get what they need at a discounted price. Why? Because if I as a doctor, and I spend a lot of time at Allergan doing this whole thing, if I as a doctor can buy it at wholesale, but I don't have the distributor's markup, I don't have the wholesaler's markup, and I don't have the manufacturer markup, and oh, by the way, I'm selling it at 15% over cost, I'm probably about 40% less than market. Why do you think Amazon's doing so well? They came in much later, buying and build side of the doctor's side, and they're making a killing, because then they also get the volume discount. And then you have the online, the doctor can actually prescribe and then have you fill it online through the doctor's prescription, and that is a way to do it. But also the doctor can just recommend something that's not a prescription, and you got direct to consumer. Direct to consumer is the hardest one. It's the easiest one to do, but the hardest one to actually get traction, because there's so many competitors. So any one of these can be a phased strategy to get to your reimbursed level. Because I'm just telling you, if you guys have not been in this market, to get something reimbursed is very difficult. Next slide. Not impossible, it's very difficult. So when you look at the reimbursement hurdles to get coverage, you ask yourself, does it solve a need? I mentioned it earlier. Unless it's something really special, and it's still probably not going to get covered right away. Because you got to remember, yes, a lot of payers follow Medicare to some degree. But I'd probably say about 70% of them don't. So you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of payers that you have to go out and talk to get coverage on your product or your device or your equipment or your service, and that is a long process. The key though is you're going to have some numbers. You're going to have utilization. You're going to have proof of concept, proof of utilization. You have to have advocates as doctors or pharmacies, whoever is your utilization customer or your demand customer. You have to have that, because not one payer is going to listen to you unless you have documented history of utilization, successful utilization, satisfaction, and cost related to that satisfaction. They're not won't even go see the table. But partners will. So you could talk to industry partners, industry competitors that may pick you up or help you with that, which is also an opportunity. Big question is it covered? And here's the funny one. I have had multiple conversations, almost every single conversation I have with device, product, services. Oh, no, it's covered, Tom, it's covered. We just want to get more coverage. Oh, that's great, okay, that's fantastic. Well, how much are you getting covered by? I don't ask who's covering it. I wouldn't even go there. Say, how much is being covered? How much is being paid? I'm making this up. $125. I said, oh, that's great. Well, what is your goal for coverage? Well, it's $3,000. Okay, so what you got covered was the office visit at the 99203, which is a new patient visit. That's what you got covered. That's covered anyway. That's the opposite. That's not your product. It's not your device. It's not your service. So remember, when you're talking about what is covered, there's more to it. So when you look, and I'll get to that in a second, but what is actually being reimbursed? And then what's the reimbursement amount? And then what are the other hurdles? Yes, it's being reimbursed, but they have to do this therapy, or this device, or that surgery before they can even get there, or they have to have a prior auth. Those are all hurdles that negatively, if you go to you go to VC and say, I'm going to do this, and you don't have these things in there, or these risks, you're either setting yourself up for monstrous failure, or you're not going to get funded. So just in general, it has to be part of your strategy. I've got a note down here on CPT code. The reason why I've had a conversation with a couple of you, CPT code is your current procedural terminology. Basically, when you go to see a doctor and they go to bill, we've had 600 doctors that bill for like 10,000 claims a month, 100,000 claims, I'm sorry. They have a HCFA 1500 form, which is the traditional standard form that every doctor has to utilize, and there's certain all the demographics of the patient. But what they ask for is what's the ICD-10 code, which is basically the diagnosis code. They have acne, they have a broken leg, whatever it is, and disease. But then there's a CPT code. What is the procedure? I saw the patients. I'm a new patient or an established patient. There's a certain CPT code, which is a 5-digit code that indicates that's what you did, that's how much time you spent with them. On every single time to get reimbursement, you have to have the CPT and ICD-9 within the reimbursement insurance site. Statement. A lot of times people say, oh, it's getting covered because it's a code like this other code that's used for something else. Again, great. You may get one payer that will pay a claim. How much do they pay versus what you needed? No, by the way, is everything covered? Because you have a surgery, you have the anesthesiology, you have a surgery center, you have the aftercare, which is baked in as far as the post-care. Oh, by the way, you have any materials that were utilized. You have the surgery center, medical supplies, and then you have the doctor who does the surgery themselves. And oh, by the way, you have any devices or any products that were utilized to insert into you or post-after. There's a whole bunch of things that may not be covered the same as this thing over here that's similar, but it really isn't. So knowing this, you don't have to know all the details, just know that who reimburses or not, how much is reimbursed, and how is it being coded are really 3 key questions that will help you guide yourself down most conversations. Anybody who has experience in this, agree, disagree, worth mentioning? That was worth mentioning, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
This is like critical.
Okay. So next slide. So let's just say it's not covered. Tips I have. It's going to take time and access. It's going to be challenging. Honestly, to get something covered by one payer, there's probably 6 months to a year process. By the time you get an appointment, if you can get an appointment with the right person, access. I talked to someone last week at the Growth Factory conference who has a product out in the market. They're out in the market now, and they have 4 contacts at UHC, United Healthcare, big payer, and they're all above VP level. He still can't get his product even listened to because there's committees, there's different filter processes in order to get there. So access and time, it takes time. And that's why I said you need to have those other revenue flows and demand opportunities within your ecosystem, within your strategy. But also know your stakeholders in your network, because I'm going to talk to you about an example in a moment that I utilize, which you would never guess I would bring these different stakeholders together to help me move what I need to move forward. But it worked magically. Because when you listen to the market and you understand who's in your network and you ask them questions about what their needs are, and you understand, you can't solve everyone's needs, but if you understand people's needs, then you may be able to bring value to 2 or 3 of them in your ecosystem, and it raises the ecosystem, which raises you up too. That's a big part of it. Advocates, doctors are, like I said, doctors, whoever utilizes it, but also doctors and business that have societies, they have associations. And I'm going to talk to that as an example again on how it helped me and mine. But there's also industry partners in government. Cameron will tell you firsthand, there's grants in city and civic, and they're all looking to grow and develop and do certain things. There's opportunities there. Prioritize regional or smaller players. You can go after UHC all day long, God bless it, go for it, and I'll see you in about 5 years. And you'll be telling me you got nowhere. Okay, you may have gotten somewhere. But there's a lot of smaller regional plans in different cities. I won't use your example, but I'll say there are healthcare deserts where basically there's not a lot of coverage and a lot of providers in certain areas, so they really can't cover the citizens that are there. And so there's ways there's typically, especially after COVID, there's typically regional carriers that understand that better than a national carrier. A national carrier is not going to care about 15,000 people stuck in the middle of Omaha, or somewhere in Nebraska. But the Omaha Unified School District system will care. And so that is something, start small, build some of those wins, get yourself some leverage. Seek information. I'm an information seeker. Ask questions, listen. I know a lot of you guys are out there, you wouldn't be here. But there's a lot of contacts and introductions people can make for you. They want to help. People want to help. I'm telling you, one of the biggest things ever is the staff at, go to the businesses that you're supporting and just talk to the administrative people, the billing people, the support people, because I guarantee there's someone in there who's been around X amount of years, who's dealt with something like this before, and they got a pharmaceutical rep that came through and said, oh my gosh, we're doing this and this and this for you, and you won't believe that this happened. They know that story and they can share. Well, they can't, the pharmaceutical rep's not there anymore, but that story can then trigger you into a contact and network. Gathering information. I used to go door to door selling revenue cycle management to buildings in LA and everywhere else. I knew I wasn't going to get their business by talking to them, but by bringing in a brochure and talking, listening, and asking questions, understanding their needs, it helped me understand how to message and position my product. But I also found out a few things that I'll share with you in a minute. Lastly, venture. I moderated a panel at the Growth Factory last week, and we had 3 venture capitalists on stage and a group of entrepreneurs, funders, and business in the audience. And the topic actually was AI and innovation in healthcare. Do you realize within about 10 minutes of the 40-minute conversation, it became all about reimbursement? Mm-hmm. The VC people says, guys, if you're out there and you're doing something, you have to have your reimbursement strategy, or at least let us know what I just talked about, the phase that on your first 2 or 3 slides, or I'm done. I'll not even listen to you. Because it is a process, and there's different things. The second thing is have a doctor on your advisory panel, or on your board, or on your staff, because that then helps you get into some of these other areas that we talked about before. So I'm just giving you their asterisk. Okay, how am I doing time?
Take it from this floor.
Okay. So I want to take a moment before I go to the next slide. Let you digest this. And so I come back to the ecosystem, the different needs and goals of people, stakeholders in your ecosystem, the different transactional interactions within the ecosystem, and then some different ways to address your strategy moving forward in the reimbursement process. Because I'm literally going to tell you right now, there's no silver bullet, and there's no one you're going to pay that's going to get you paid any faster. I shouldn't say any, but you're not going to get reimbursed overnight. I don't care how much money you throw at it. Not going to happen. Genentech, McKesson, because McKesson has a bunch of drugs they want to get covered and stuff, but on behalf of pharmaceuticals. But I can literally name companies. I was part of that 30 years ago. And it's gotten even bigger and harder. So I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm not trying to deter anyone. I'm saying the other strategies that I put in there, or the tactics, more opportunities to bridge the gap while you're moving along, and also to check the boxes of milestones on funding. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next slide. I want to give you an example, a real-world example of what happened. So why is it important to know your shareholders? Well, we talked about it. Shareholders, if you understand the needs and challenges, you can help look for solutions. If you can solve for one of the stakeholders, or 2 or 3 of the stakeholders, you can actually help everyone become a win-win. So when I had a Centix, as I started to say earlier, I built a revenue cycle management company, which is the biggest part. And as I said, doctors are doing $1 million, $1.5 million a year in collections. What, they're gonna listen to me. Why would they listen to me? Yes, I was a consultant, yes, I did some stuff, but why would they listen to me taking over their billing? I've never done it before. So I had no credibility. I also didn't have access to a lot of the right doctors. Because if I can build some doctor advocates, I can move the needle, and I don't have to start from scratch every conversation. I'm being introduced, i.e. Cameron introduced me to Rich. I didn't have to start from scratch on who I am. You already said, oh, he's got to be somewhat legit, or Cameron would introduce me, right? Same thing. And the last thing is scale. I didn't have scale, it's just one of me. So when you have share of voice SOV in the doctor's business or the network, that's a big deal. To have someone who's got a big enough voice that people listen to on your behalf, that's a big deal. I didn't have any of those things. So that was my problem. I had to try to solve that. So one thing I did is identified, well, I'm in the financial side helping the doctor out. What other financial things do they have? Well, they have their MedStart supplies, which is the second biggest cost that they have besides their rent and their people, sorry, the third. And one of their biggest line item was sutures, Johnson & Johnson sutures. So $20,000 or $30,000, about $30,000 a year MedStart supply cost, roughly $10,000 or $9,800 of that was sutures. And they had to buy it at cost. And J&J, I'm sorry, at full margin. And J&J does not discount.
That's for sure.
Okay?
Huh.
So J&J wouldn't discount. Okay, so that's a problem they have. Well, having gone around, I understood that J&J was actually laying off their dermatology sales force. Okay. Second thing is, I had some doctors that were friends, and one of them was part of the California State Dermatology Society. He was the treasurer, becoming the vice president. And he was telling me, and I also had a friend who was at the American Society of Dermatology Surgeons, which is a national society, another society and association I'm talking about. They both had the same thing when I was talking to them. They said, you know what? God, we're just really struggling with member renewal. Because everyone wants a piece of their pie, and it's $500 a year. It's not that much, but it supports this cause, it supports that cause. We just don't differentiate ourselves. And I went, okay, so let me ask you a question. If I can get sutures at a discount that's important to you, and I offer it to you exclusively if they renew, and I can save them money, would that be valuable? I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. Okay. So I did. I went out to J&J, got a contract. I got one of only 3 contracts in North America. The other 2 contracts, $100 million or more in sales. I had 90,000. 90,000. So when the person at the GFX said, well, I'm scared to talk to SMUD because they may not want what I have. They have needs too, if you approach it in the right way. And I got a 20% discount. And at a certain volume, I get a 30% discount. 30% discount on $3,000 is $900 or $1,000, more than pays for their $500 renewal. And oh, by the way, the average practice has 2.5 doctors, so do the math. It's well worth it. So then I went to McKesson and Cardinal Health, the biggest wholesaler distributors, and I says, hey, if I can bring this and this and this, would you add a discount on top of that? And they did. So I ended up getting 40% discounts on sutures that they couldn't get discounts for the California State Dermatology Society and the American Society of Dermatology and 2 other societies, because they kind of compete, so I had to be careful.
Yeah.
And I got their blessing. And you know what the best part was? Why did I do it?
Building network connections.
I passed every penny, because I get rev share on all that. I passed every penny on the doctors, and that's how I got to the 40%. So why did I do it?
Built your presence in the industry, and it's a long, hard slog.
So when you have the California State Derm Society communicating to the California dermatologists, which is thousands, that, hey, if you renew, you will get this discount on your sutures by ordering through the same people you're ordering through today, basically. There was some transition there, but it was mostly the same. And all you got to do is just sign this piece of paper through Centix Health, and they also provide revenue cycle management and inventory management software. And then, after I got that going, I gave Cal State Derm Society and American Society of Dermatology Surgeons rev share on my RCM. So then they started pushing out. It didn't ultimately get me very far, but I led with something bringing value to two different stakeholders that had nothing to do with me. I built a buying group, basically. I got 1,600 doctors utilizing in less than 12 months, 1,600 doctors utilizing about $400,000 a year in suture purchases in less than 12 months. But I delivered to J&J what I said I would deliver. I delivered to the societies. So when I talk about ecosystem and I talk about leveraging, I was one person, guys. One person. And I'm dealing with one of the biggest companies in the world, J&J and McKesson, and a society that, why the hell they talk to me? Why? Because I talk and ask questions. And so it's kind of bring the whole scope of your strategy cannot just be vision, goals. I mean, I don't say boring because I love that stuff, but it was like vision, goals, plan, execution, milestones, reporting, communication. I get it. There are soft parts in this and phase parts that really have to be taken into account when building a business, especially in the med-surg medical reimbursement side. So, a lot of information I threw out there. I tried to hit high-level skim across. Hopefully it was valuable, and I'm absolutely open to questions.
Absolutely.
Does like that?
Does it? Oh. And I know I went fast, but a little bit of my style.
So if you had a product, that actually saves them money, would that help fast track whatever it is you have?
So we're gonna call it table stakes. You're gonna assume that it's gonna save them money. Everyone's gonna save money, or you're not even gonna get a conversation.
Okay, so that's just a minimum. It has to save them money. If it doesn't save money, then
Has to work. So first of all, what's the most expensive drug? Does anyone know?
Is the wrong one?
Most expensive medication a doctor can prescribe is one that doesn't work.
oh
Okay?
Yeah.
I learned that a long time ago in pharma. So, it has to work. It has to save money. And there has to be a demand. It has to be consumption utilization numbers that say the market's asking for this versus what they have today. Because you're replacing something. They're not going to just continue to plug things in because they're going to look for a replacement. And then you have change management with the doctors, and you have change management with the other providers on managing that as well. So yeah, so it's going to need to save some money.
okay.
The hard lift in getting through the whole process of reimbursement almost makes it really attractive to consider corporate venture capital and having a partner that is in the business of passing these things. I know I look both at Novartis and Johnson & Johnson on their CVP departments, and Jack was talking about that last year too. Had that guy from Sony at last year's GFX. He was saying they were moving to 60% corporate, but had been at 30%, but expected it to be 60% corporate venture capital in his venture fund.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, partnering, utilizing resources that are not your resources to do that are absolutely the right way.
Yeah.
I would caution that it doesn't mean it's going to happen any faster, but now you have at least partners in doing it together, and so your money can last longer and you have a little longer runway.
And they've got experience,
Absolutely.
They generally let some of the experience rub through.
100%. 100%.
Well, I can share my experience with reimbursement. So I was working for a startup called ClearPath. So we used to be North American Scientific, and then we transitioned to a company called ClearPath, and we made breast brachytherapy devices. So when I came on, the device was already 510(k) approved, and we were going out to early adopters, key opinion leaders, right? So it's a funny story. So we go out to Dallas, and we're working with Dr. Peter Beisch, and we're doing a study. And I think we did 3 patients because each treatment takes a week, so we did 3 patients in that week. And then I was there at the clinic, and I guess it'd be the payment person or somebody in the office was on the phone with the insurance company. And they were saying, well, this is a new product. I don't know if we should reimburse it. So then I put her on the phone with our regulatory person, and her and the guy's name is Lee. So Lee and her were talking back and forth, and I was on the phone And I just remember the person, and I can't remember if it was Medicare or if it was just like a regular carrier, but them asking us how much we should get reimbursed for.
Mhm.
You know, and we were like, $2,500? And they're like, okay. But it was that weird, it's a weird transaction. I'm like, is that how this is insurance reimbursement is figured out? Like, I know, no, not completely,
Yeah.
but maybe this is like an off sort of deal, but I remember that's exactly how it happened.
It sounds really off script.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was, yeah.
Well, there are, I literally forgot the term, just dropped in my head, but basically there is investigational, reimbursement, on products.
Yeah,
And you can get that, and it's basically a temporary,
right.
code, so to speak. It's not, it is. And unfortunately, if you get labeled with that, it's really hard to get past investigational when you're having the other conversations. On the flip side, I don't know what therapy the device was, and if it's associated with something else, sometimes lower level people they have some flexibility
Yeah.
to make a judgment, especially on something that's,
It's for treating cancer.
yeah. So, and when you got cancer and things like that, it opens up the conversation a little bit. But I would tell you, past 1 or 2 times getting reimbursed, that's going to raise a red flag to somebody, and it's going to go through the channels because they want to go through the committees. So the way they're approving and paying for the right things, and they're not underpaying what should be paid for. And quite frankly, there are certain things that are being paid for that are outside of the benefits that the employer is paying for. Then all of a sudden, now the cost goes back to the employer or changes their cost structure, and that becomes another conversation.
So if you have, so like in our case, we were FDA approved 510K, right? So,
Yep.
so our grandfathered in as it is already. So do
You're
they,
not grandfathered into reimbursement.
right, so that was my next question.
You're
So
grandfathered in,
approval we are.
Yep.
So, but,
Mhm.
so is there like a list that they keep of like approved devices or like
Yeah.
approved for reimbursement?
Yeah. Well, I want to say, so I haven't done it in a long time. We used to have lists, but now there's a directory they
Sure.
can go to, and they can pull down the directory, say what is approved in this area or not approved, because some things were approved and not approved anymore. So now it's a more flexible list or a usable list. But yes.
Okay. Yeah. I used to work
But-
with J&J too, so. But
So you know what I'm saying?
well, I was on the R&D side, so I was an R&D engineer and then manager or whatever, but we did electrophysiology catheters, so our electrophysiology catheters, I think were just bundled into like, this like, yes, they're gonna get reimbursed because they're J&J. So on my side, even on the marketing side, I was never really involved with like the reimbursement strategy.
Right.
I think that was all figured out before we even got started, you know, as like a phase 0 type of thing in the project. But yeah, no, it's still very, very interesting to hear all that. It sounds like some muddy waters, actually.
Yeah. Well, as I said, honestly, there's no silver bullet, and anyone who says there is
It's a big industry.
Yeah, no.
But it was weird though. It's actually more straightforward than it appears to be. But there's just a lot of hurdles in that lane that you're in.
Okay.
Questions, thoughts, feedback?
So, Tom, how many payers would you say there are in the United States?
Can I say infinity? I'm just serious. Because you have payers that have, so there's payers within payers within payers. And there's brokers that then broker payers that then have payers that are
That was
associated
good,
payers.
then, you know, because you mentioned both McKesson and Cardinal. I lost my shorts during COVID because I wasn't part of the McKesson Cardinal distribution plan. Right, so I had a bunch of product coming in from all over the world, but I couldn't get it distributed because the only place that we could get PPEs and other products distributed in the United States at the time was through McKesson. So I did not follow your recommendations at that point. So I'm not going to do that again. That said, the question ends up being, look, I'm trying to visualize if I can. There are gazillions of payers.
Right.
But below that, there's distribution channels, and below that, there's probably brokers, right? And below that, there's probably some software providers that try and do all of that.
Yes.
How many of those are there? And are they good, you know?
I have not, so I had a technology that we had and participated in that, but that was 10 years ago then,
Okay,
11 years ago. So it's outdated information.
sure.
I mean, realistically, I think there was roughly, we call them houses, but basically 20 houses
Mhm.
that really were brokering all the tech. to healthcare, sorry, not all. 80% of the tech to the legitimate healthcare contingencies. And I don't know, I don't know the answer today.
That's fair, that's fine. I'm just getting, sizing.
What's your thoughts? What's your things?
Well, we were talking a little bit earlier about what you can do with AI. And the really interesting thing about AI is that once you train it with the rules, you can pretty much do an awful lot of different things that you could never do before.
Mm-hmm.
And so what the challenge is getting the rules, right? And the exceptions to the rules. If I have all of those, I mean, I can actually train the AI to do that right now. So that's what I'm trying to get the size of the market, right? When people say, oh, you use this, here's the CPT codes, right? And here's the treatment codes on that side. So then the question ends up being, okay, what are the possible permutations that you could potentially be using? And that requires the individual who's submitting that into the paying system, whoever it ends up being, understand all of those. But I can have an AI do that.
So you can talk to me afterwards. There's a company that I basically my mentor to one of their people. But they have AI very much into their software system. And I think they would be interested in talking to you to share information.
Love
I mean, I have a number of others. So Athena Health was actually back in 2010, 12, 14, one of the top companies, besides Cerner and a couple others, that I'll call it aggregated information
right.
to create an algorithm, a code on how to be AI back then.
Right.
So what it wasn't. But
Right.
the son, I would probably say it's a dime a dozen now. There's just so many that are using AI or saying they're using AI in their software. I think the real people who are actually using AI is not that big.
Yeah.
For what you shared earlier, what you guys are doing.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's all about the practitioner trying to facilitate them. That's what we're doing. Where other AI companies are focusing on, curing cancer.
And they want preventative health or diagnostic. That's really what they're
Yeah,
focused on.
yep, exactly. I mean, one of the things that one of the VCs we talked with in an informal conversation was if you can solve this problem, we will write you a check today.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what you said. And fortunately,
Which problem is that? That I'm getting on the list?
insurance.
Oh,
If you can solve the reimbursement problem, then you've really started attacking one of the fundamental challenges in the healthcare system. Period, because it's broken.
Well,
All of the different levels that you define, right?
Yeah.
Everybody takes a little piece of the pie, and which is why Mark Cuban's cost plus is so doing so well, right? Because it cuts out all of those different players in the middle. Unfortunately, you probably experience this, since they're so big in the distribution and embedded into the system itself. They don't want to change. They must keep it the way it is.
They are though. I just heard today that Walgreens is closing down 1,200 locations as a result of internet competition.
Sure.
So it is changing.
Yeah, it's definitely going to change. I'm a big partnership guy from back in the day, right? I come from Apple, working in Silicon Valley. But now what we're talking about doing is implementing AI in a way that really facilitates the communication and all the way in the value chain. We were talking earlier about what happens in this building for manufacturing, and what I do business mentoring and coaching. I've done it for 35 years as well. So everything that you're talking about, I get what you're saying. This particular industry is so unique because of how fractured it is. And everybody in their fiefdom wants to keep their fiefdom exactly the way it is. That being able to find one stakeholder that you can really latch onto, which is what we've done. We've identified the practitioner, not the hospital. Epic is there. We're never going to get Epic at it. But the practitioner and layering something on top of it, which is Daryl, what we're talking about for you. Layering something sitting right on top of what they currently existing do. So they don't have to do change management. That's how we're approaching it from a technology and a business model side. I would love to talk with you, Thom, later. We're definitely going to have a conversation.
Yeah, but I think from my perspective, like on the medical device side, the biggest thing would be is to figure out how to make sure that if I'm developing something that I can get on the lists that we're talking about, right? Because if you're not on the reimbursement list or don't have a strategy to get on the reimbursement list, that makes things difficult because then doctors don't want to use your product because they're going to get paid back for it. And maybe I don't understand it because it seems like because the payers that we would be worried about as a medical device company would be to make sure that the insurance would reimburse us, or reimburse the doctor anyway, or reimburse the doctor for using our product. But if the payers all have a different set of rules, right? That's what I understand, because I always understood it too, that the kind of the holy grail was Medicare, like making sure Medicare would reimburse for it and the other providers would kind of follow suit.
Not necessarily.
Right.
There are so it changes all the time, but basically most payers, I want to say legitimate, it's so bad. I don't want to say legitimate. Most straightforward payers will follow Medicare because Medicare has done the work, but they don't have to do for themselves. So they'll follow it. It doesn't mean they reimburse, because you got to remember, just because someone covers something, so you could be a doctor on Rancho Cordova, you could be a doctor in Sacramento, you could be a doctor in Roseville. I have a different contract with each one of you, and I'm going to pay you differently for the same code. I can do a 99213, established patient visit, level 2, and I'm going to pay you 180, I'm going to pay you 230, I'm going to pay you 190. Why? Because I can.
Right.
Because you got in when I had no one else around, so you got the highest price. You came in later, but you could associate with someone, and you came in the latest, and I got too many people on my panel, so I'm just going to cover that. Now, that is not always the case, but that is something that's a legitimate. I used to help doctors negotiate contracts all the time.
Right.
All the time, and that's why they used to have PBN or IPAs back in the day. My acronyms all screwed up. And there's one big one here, Full Foundation actually started out as one, but there's IPAs, and that's what they got them, so they can negotiate contracts on behalf of the group of doctors to get better pricing, which you don't even hear those anymore.
I'm kind of thinking as far as the product and the price point, you're ratcheting that back down to what's the cost to the patient and are they going to pay for it or lean on someone else? And so like little things that are valuable, they may choose to pay out of pocket. You'll have somewhat of a market.
Yeah.
But the expensive things, they are going to rely on an insurance payer to fill in.
Yeah, well, I'll just speak about my experience. So like the one I was at a startup, the one that we did was a breast brachytherapy device, right? So it was a delivery device to high dose radiation for treating breast cancer. So again, we were in the clinic, we had an early adopter, key opinion leader. We were in production, but not at huge scale, right? So we're kind of starting the same, but we had approval. We had 510K approval. We do the study. The lady and the billing lady person, whoever it was, literally was on the phone with the insurance, like figuring out like how they're going to get reimbursed for it.
Yeah.
I think the strategy that Lee used, who was like our regulatory affairs person at the time, was like, well, it's just like X product that's been out for a few years.
Yeah.
And it was about $2,500. And they're like,
that are already.
like, cool, man, let's do it. So I was like, but me being on the phone and being like, a younger engineer, I'm like, is that how that works? So, but I mean, to a certain degree it is, right? Because they try to do a comparison. Well, we're reimbursing for product X that does the same thing, kind of, for $2,500, then this new product Y, then it falls in the same category, same code probably. Then that's how it goes. But again, like if I'm a startup, right, and I'm starting my new business and I have this, what I think is a fantastic idea for a product, if I can't get someone to agree with me, right, especially so that FDA approval probably makes a huge difference, even though I know that approval doesn't mean reimbursement, but
Oh, it's a big deal. I mean,
Right, because like you can't market it, so.
you can't, yeah.
So Medicare, matters, and that's what I remember on our side, the Medicare, the fact that and that's why I think it was Medicare on the phone, that the fact that Medicare would approve it was a big deal. But again, I think we go back to Rich and I always talk about like new product development, and granted, I've never been never had my own startup. I've been at a number of companies, and I've always been in new product development. Always at phase 0 is to figure out like if you're ready, well, if anybody even cares about it, right? That's the so what question. I got this great medical device that'll treat brain tumors, like, so what? Meaning like, is there anybody else doing it? Can you get reimbursement for it? Like all these questions you have to answer before you even get started. So, I mean, this all kind of folds into that.
You make it sound like Maud, the service center is the secret sauce.
I don't know. Well, I mean, I don't know. The lady who was at this, we were at the Dallas Care Center, and she convinced the person on the phone that was the right thing to do. Like I said, it all seemed very simplistic, but.
Sure, if you're seeing 100 patients, you're not gonna have 100 phone calls like that because.
Yeah, right.
of the cost, and so I love that story.
Yeah.
Because that absolutely does happen.
Mhm.
The scalability of it's a challenge, and I'm not saying not to do it, but I mean, that's why I love the story. The second thing is the payer, they have literally printouts on every single thing that they pay for and stuff, and I've been there. And it's not even pronounced anymore, but there are codes like
Data sets that you need to AI.
there's literally a red line that goes across the screen that all this stuff needs to be questioned. And I guarantee that it was popped right up there on the resume.
Sure.
And then they go highest dollar amount to, highest dollar amount, highest volume down. And so you probably can that absolutely can happen for months.
Yeah.
100%, yeah.
And then bingo.
You know what?
And then bingo.
Yeah.
Day of reckoning.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Wonderful, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah.
All
right. Thank you.
If there's something we can do with the deck, because I know Rich can do some things with it, let me know. But this is literally meant to be just an